just let that be and lean into the process,
Into the
um,
uncertainty and the
into the
openness to
uncertainty.
like open
Yeah,
exploration rather than finding evidence to prove your point.
yeah, absolutely. And I think uncertainty. It's funny you bring that because I think uncertainty is one of OT's superpowers. And I think it's a superpower we push away because it feels like it's through the uncertainty that we can actually sit with people and explore the things that we need to with them. Because if we come in with the answers, then we're rolling the dice and just hoping that something's going to land. But it's in that uncertainty. But at the same time, uncertainty challenges our expert status. It makes us kind of maybe not feel confident. And yeah, I feel like uncertainty is where so much of the magic lies in the work that we do. I just think we need to own that. I think we need to absolutely own uncertainty. And our ability to sit in uncertainty is one of our superpowers.
You're listening to the Brave OT podcast with me, Carlin Nink. This podcast is all about empowering occupational therapists to step up, level up, blaze some trails, and maybe engage in a little conscious rebellion in service of our profession, our clients, our work, our businesses, and living our mission wholeheartedly. We are all about keeping it real, doing hard things, unhustling, being curious, exploring, growing through our challenges, and finding joy, fulfillment, and vitality as we do so. Really, we're OTing ourselves and each other. I hope you love this episode. As occupational therapists, we all know the uncertainty that surrounds our profession, how we communicate it to others, how we define our scope and impact, how others see our value. Yet I think we deeply know our value and purpose as OTs. In my role supporting OTs in their personal and professional development, I know that this uncertainty sometimes undermines the confidence of the OTs, particularly when they're stepping out of traditional roles and into private practice or emerging roles. So what if we reframe that uncertainty as an opportunity rather than a problem? What if we look at it as a way to explore with our clients rather than dictating a path based on our expert recommendations? There are opportunities there. In this episode of the Brave OT podcast, my guest and I dive into the world of occupational therapy and explore how to stand firm in the values of OT and lean into the uncertainty that naturally arises. Our guest today is Brad Williams. He's an Australian OT and founder of the Becoming Collective, an online community of OTs who are trying to reconnect with the roots of the profession and understand what occupational therapy means to them as individuals. In this interview, Brad shares his insights on the importance of being brave and leaning into uncertainty, the value of understanding your own values and ways of seeing the world, and the role of occupational therapy in nature. He has a pediatric practice working with kids doing occupational therapy in nature. He also talks about the vision for the Becoming Collective and how he connects with his own values by creating this community of OTs who are cruising in a similar direction and sharing tools to support each other. Brad and I share a philosophy about doing things imperfectly so that we can learn and grow in the process of implementation and co-creation with our clients, be they traditional recipients of OT services or the OTs in our communities. Join us as we explore the world of occupational therapy and discover the power of embracing uncertainty and leaning into our values. Welcome, Brad Williams. I'm so excited you're here on the Brave OT podcast. Thanks for joining us.
I'm also excited to be here, and thanks for inviting me and doing this thing.
No problem. So you have two main things going these days. You have your based practice and you've launched the Becoming Collective. Can you tell us a bit about each of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So my nature-based practice called Naturally Gathered has been going for a few years now. It began as a need. I noticed a real need for parents and kids to connect with natural spaces. So originally I started it as something called pop-up wild play groups with the idea of connecting families to natural spaces and to each other, and sort of being an advocate and supporting, risk taking and connection to nature, and free play, really kind of advocating for free play. Because I felt like there was such a gap for parents and families. So I kind of started there, but eventually evolved. I got an opportunity to work in a beautiful nature, 200 hectares of kind of bush and scrub. And so
Mm.
I started a nature-based practice up there, or I called it occupational therapy in nature because I felt like that wording
Mhm.
that way was significant. So, and yeah, we ran groups and did one-on-one work, and yeah, that evolved as it went on as well. I noticed a shift, which I originally went in and thought, yeah, like it's all about nature. It still was to some extent, but it probably shifted towards more um, helping these kids to kind of see and understand who they are and help grow their identity and sense of self in the context of nature, in the context of their peers, the groups that we did. And so those groups looked quite unlike groups I had done before. They were really focused on shared interests. There was lots of open and free play time where we'd support curiosity and discovery. We'd support kids to kind of work things out. And we really, um, yeah, we'd watch and notice and lift important things up that felt and seemed important. And yeah, gave like-minded kids opportunities to connect in ways that felt significant to them rather than me placing that on them. I got a lot of joy out of that. The groups unfortunately have kind of, because we've lost access to the site, have kind of, so much that practice is shifted. It's still going, but I guess in that process and my whole journey as being an OT, I've kind of always been kind of seeking. I got out of university and jumped into working with kids with autism, or autistic children, and I was always, you'd be kind of seeking all of these strategies and all these tools and hacks and things like that. And then, yeah, as time went on, I just felt increasingly kind of questioning what part of me was an OT, and a growing disconnect, and a feeling of sort of that imposter syndrome would show up kind of on almost like a rhythmic basis. And I changed jobs. I went into sort of a more of a community health kind of role. And then I did some private practice, and then I did my nature-based practice, and kind of all throughout, I kind of kept coming back to these questions about, yeah, what was OT for me, and trying to kind of make sense of, um, yeah, why I felt this kind of disconnect. I sort of got drawn to do some play therapy training at some point, which I did kind of a couple of modules of. As another example, during the time I was starting the OT in nature service, I was tempted and drawn towards like adventure therapy. Um, I didn't end up going that route because I believed that what OT gave me was enough. I feel like I could have added some value, but I felt like I needed to lean into that. And so, yeah, all the while I saw and heard, I guess, people having a similar challenge, this kind of love for OT, but this kind of confusing need to seek other stuff. And also kind of, I don't know, looking for kind of this magic fix. So yeah, that really got me questioning kind of what that was about and why OTs particularly experience that feeling. And so, yeah, I came to some conclusions,
Mhm.
and that led me to creating the Becoming Collective late last year. And so it's an online community of OTs, and yeah, we're really together trying to kind of reconnect to the roots of OT, and also understand what OT is for us as individuals within that process. I think that's an important part of the piece too.
Absolutely. Um, Oh, there are so many pieces in there that I would love to chat about. I see this so much in OTs. And are you connected with OTs internationally? Like, I know you reached out and we talked. I'm in Canada, you're in Australia. Are you getting quite a broad audience?
Not in that space. Yeah, I do have, I think from the bits and pieces that I've jumped into, I've sort of, I've got a few, like, I'm not discounting, I've got a few bits and pieces, but not in that space.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think I'm
I've got one
observing.
American, one American US, one
Okay.
US OT jumped in, which is pretty exciting.
That is exciting because I think that I'm seeing more like a lot of regional differences in that sort of net OTs who become disenchanted with like how OT is showing up in their workplaces and in their jobs and in the expectations and how it doesn't connect with what they understand, what they know OT to be. And I'm seeing there are certain areas where like it sounds to be a big challenge in the US. And so often there are systems and systems of who's paying and what they will and won't pay for, and that those things sort of dictating what our scope of practice is or what problem we're there to solve. And certainly I'm hearing it in many countries, but I think there are pockets of different themes in different countries of that similar flavor, though.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. And I think just to preface that, I guess there are cultural or funding things that
Mhm.
certainly kind of are going to make it tricky for us to work in ways that are, connected to the way we believe, our work should look like, or what the core of our work should look like. So I guess that's an important thing to acknowledge. But yeah, I think with things like that, I wonder, whether we need to look longer term and to be honest with you, I think in some ways, we've marketed ourselves as OTs, really well. People in some ways, people know who we are, and it seems to be a growing profession. But in some ways, I feel like we've actually really poorly marketed ourselves because, most of the time people don't really understand what we do. We've got such a broad scope that's a real challenge for us. Um,
Because
so
it's
yeah,
hard. If you think about it, we could help people of all ages with all of the things they need to do, with all the conditions. It's so many things that it's nothing. Yet we understand that it's not nothing because it's from this frame of reference, from this way of looking at the person in their environment with what they've going on, what they're trying to do, and occupation being the ultimate focus. But those are all fancy words that don't make a lot of sense to people who haven't studied those models.
yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Hey, and I just wonder. That's, I guess, part of the story is, I think, is to try and work out a better way
Mm.
to communicate. We had Matthew Molyneux on, who's an Australian OT, head at one of the schools, and done lots of work around identity and things like that. And we chatted about, trying to at least get to the core of the thing that joined us all together, and then having a kind of a clear way to try to communicate that. To ourselves as well as others. I think it's as important, for us to be able to do that to us for ourselves as well as people that we're working alongside.
Have you found any really beautiful explanations that you like?
I think I'm still on a journey as well.
Yeah.
I
Nobody's solved this
again,
problem yet, right?
yeah,
No.
no, no, I haven't. I mean, he talked about sort of shared paradigms. Matthew Molyneux did talk about shared paradigms as the thing that holds us together. And those were that well, humans are occupational beings. We view issues as occupational challenges, and practice is occupational based. Um, and I think again, it gets hard because perhaps not all OTs would necessarily relate to those three things in their work as well. So I think that's where it kind of gets part of it as well.
Yeah, it depends on what your role on a team is. Sometimes it's an OT filling a very sort of specific, narrow role that doesn't encompass the full scope of what we can do. And some people like that because it narrows in the focus.
Mm,
That would I would not. Um, I prefer to be able to look through that full breadth of our scope and way of looking at a person in their environments, in their occupations, and yeah.
mm,
Mhm.
mm. Yeah. I mean, I've had lots of wanderings about um, identity as well, and how that, because I think I have this sense that, I think we tend to look at things like this anyway. Our occupations are always, or nearly always, viewed through the context of the person's identity that we're working with.
Mhm.
That that wasn't part of the paradigm that, this contemporary paradigm that was shared, but I think it's a really significant thing that I imagine most OTs would find important. That the occupations that we're talking about are only ever really viewed through the identity of the person that we're working with, the identity being, their history, their values, their how they see themselves, their sense of self, the things they find important, their community that they're a part of.
Motivations, yes.
Yes, yeah, motivations, yeah, yeah,
Sounding very moho.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think I've been drawn back to Moho
Yeah.
um, in the past couple of years as well. I've certainly rediscovered um, a lot through that process. Just kind of thinking about identity and competence kind of shook me a little bit a couple of years ago when I kind of rediscovered that, and I was like, "Whoa, yeah, okay, this I hadn't really, I don't know, I hadn't really gone deep in terms of thinking about things in those ways, and
I don't think we
and
can
that's
when we're a student almost. Like I feel like it takes a bit of marinating in occupation to actually then go back. Because I feel the same. I remember studying moho, but didn't feel like I took anything with me from it. Just sort of some words that was a rather complex model. But now having
mm,
worked with people for a long time and relearning moho, oh, that's brilliant. Like I can see where all of it
yeah,
really make a lot of sense.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's so funny. I had that experience. There was one OT at uni who loved Moho, and I think she wasn't studying straight from school. She'd been out in the world a little bit, but like I feel like most of us that are going straight into it, just like get it, because there's a complex model that probably needs some experience to kind of
Yeah.
attach to the different pieces of it.
How are you going about revisiting it?
I got curious, as I tend to do, and I kind of dove in. Um, my wife, Steph, is an OT and works in adult mental health in a community team. Um, and so she increasingly is used it on training, and we just got chatting, and because it's not really used in pediatric over here. And so, yeah, we got chatting, and I was just like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
As we chatted more and more, and I was kind of reading, and I was like, to, I need to go deeper. And so at the time, I reached out to whoever I could find to kind of locally and beyond, and then end up speaking with Patricia Boyer in the US, who was involved in the textbooks. But yeah, I asked her for some help, and yeah, we ended up kind of co-creating and delivering a 12-month kind of learning through discussion program where we kind of read the textbooks and have a small group of OTs and
Mm,
have a conversation from month to month. So that was really, really, really valuable. I got a
great.
lot of joy and energy from that, and a learned a lot. So yeah, I guess that was another thing that um, got me thinking about. We keep moving forwards together in a way that, because I think part of the cool thing about that was we'd have these kind of ongoing conversations, and it would be the same group of people week after week that we could kind of build upon and journey with, which was awesome.
This makes so much sense with that thread that's through everything you've done, naturally gathered, the becoming collective, bringing OTs together to learn together. What's the value that underpins all of these things for you?
Yeah, I've got an analogy and so I've got. I think this is how I'm trying to make sense. I feel like I left uni and essentially was kind of in a boat, and I kind of cruised out in the ocean in my boat, trying to visit islands, to pick up tools, to work out where I need to go next with my work and who to support. So I've kind of been visiting these islands, speaking to people on the islands, and then, moving on and journeying sort of alone. I've had guidance along the way from, mentors and within the workplaces and things like that. But ultimately kind of sometimes that's how it kind of feels, I feel like. But I guess my vision for the Becoming Collective, or really any community that's designed in a particular way, is to have a whole crew, have a convoy of boats, cruising the ocean, heading in the same direction, and I guess discovering maybe tools together and sharing them and using them together to kind of head and to know at least what direction we're going and what things that we have in common. And sometimes boats are going to have problems and have struggles, and there'll be tugboats in there to kind of pull you along when you need that. And, I think that's what I want. And this thing's not going to be for everyone, and that's okay as well. There'll probably be hopefully another convoy, over in the next ocean over, that might be better for that particular person or boat. But yeah, that's kind of my visual story representation of kind of what I feel like we need as humans, and maybe what I'm hoping we can create for this particular group of humans.
And I'm hearing the idea is not to arrive at somewhere per se, but rather the journey, that occupation
Yeah,
of journeying and learning and discovering and exploring together.
yeah, totally. I've had a number of moments in the past, probably a year or two. I'm quite idealistic. I really like thinking about things and coming up with things and, solving problems. And I like them to work in the way that my mind has crafted them. They don't, obviously. And so, a few things have pointed me to just let that be and, lean into the process.
Into the uncertainty and the openness
Into the uncertainty.
like open
Yeah.
exploration rather than finding evidence to prove your point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think uncertainty, it's funny you bring that, because I think uncertainty is one of OT's superpowers. And I think it's a superpower we push away because it feels like it's through the uncertainty that we can actually sit with people and explore the things that we need to with them. Because if we come in with the answers, then we're rolling the dice and just hoping that something's going to land. But it's in that uncertainty, but at the same time, uncertainty challenges our expert status. It makes us kind of maybe not feel confident. And yeah, I feel like uncertainty is where so much of the magic lies in the work that we do. And I think I just think we need to own that. I think we need to absolutely own uncertainty. And our ability to sit in uncertainty is one of our superpowers.
Now, do you going back to that earlier part of the conversation about essentially OT being a bit undersold because of our identity crisis or not having a great way to explain OT? I feel that to find a better explanation of OT would be to let go of the uncertainty And in letting go of the uncertainty, we let go of that superpower. And so it feels
Yeah.
like it kind of comes to that full circle of, well, do we actually really want to put ourselves in a better box? I don't think we do.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a real challenge. But I do believe that you can do both. I haven't looked at how yet, but I do believe you can do both. I do believe you can own uncertainty and and the value that brings, and how it can lead to greater collaboration, and it can lead to, I think it's in part about understanding the value that uncertainty brings,
Mhm.
when we bring it back. Yeah, I guess to be clear, when we're talking about uncertainties, people like, I don't know. I'm just wondering whether people listening like, what do you mean?
What are these two
Uncertainty, but
rambling on about?
maybe. But I guess I think about uncertainty. Like I read a book, 4,000 Weeks recently, and it was like, you know, you can make all the plans in the world, but plans are only intentions, and the future will ultimately decide. Like you don't really have that much control over it, but plans are obviously important. I guess I see uncertainty as when I'm working with my clients. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't even know what's going to work or what's not going to work. Really, in the end, I'm using my skills in understanding where this human is at, their history, and the things that are important to them. And then I'm asking questions to make at least a plan and a hypothesis that we can explore and test together and then review and then go from there. I wrote something the other day where I think sometimes our expertise can devalue our work because we put in recommendations, um, and say this and this to solve this, this and this. And then we're seen as the expert and they do the recommendations, they don't work. Like they go, well, it's me. What did I do? You know,
Yeah, somehow you did
where
not
did I go
predict at
wrong?
day one what would happen in the
Yeah.
next 64 days. Yeah.
And so then sometimes it'll come back to the person and they'll blame themselves or, sometimes they might blame us. But yeah, I wonder, whether if instead of recommendations in many of our settings, we ask questions and create hypotheses, and then all of a sudden we've got a collaborative, curious way of working, um, rather than a full stop.
Oh, I like it. I feel a SMART goal conversation coming on here. How do you feel about SMART goals?
A smart goal. Is that what you said?
SMART,
I thought you said a spark.
SMART,
Yeah.
SMART.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan for all of the reasons you've just explained, so I'm curious what your take is on them.
No, I agree. I haven't quite, I, I'm still, again, another thing that I'm still kind of working through. I don't know that I think having intentions and hypotheses seem to make more sense to me than having smart goals. Um, because again, like the journey, the process, is what I'm discovering is what it's about. I kind of appreciate the need, people come to you, and that's how I understand how they can support you to an extent. But yeah. Because how do you work towards things as you move forwards, or how do you look forwards and
I tend to similarly, I look more at intentions, but what's important to people, what's problematic for them, what do they care about? But if we were to set a very specific goal at intake and then work toward it, we stop exploring curiously. And I think that there's a meandering path. I often describe it with my both my coaching clients and with the clients I help as an OT, that often from where we stand today, we can't see around the mountain. We can't see what's on the next path, but we have a general sense of where we're headed. And let's head with the openness. Let's explore. Let's figure some things out along the way. There's so much value in that journey. And then we get a little bit further with a little bit more courage and curiosity and a little bit more information, a little bit more resilience, and we can see a little bit more and you can see a little further. And similarly, letting go of any agenda that I have and supporting this client in their journey. And I work in adult mental health, and I also coach other OTs. And so they're the thinking about that frame of reference of my client, sort of supporting them on that journey of learning and exploration, and maybe being able to unhook. I use a lot of acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, in my work. And so using a lot of ACT tools to really lean into that curiosity and exploration of values. And in ACT, we talk about moving toward living in alignment with our values, or when we're moving away, what are the things that are pulling us away? I actually have a ship analogy as well for ACT, that there's a lighthouse that is our values lighthouse. And here you are on your ship, you're sort of one precious light. And when the seas are clear, the skies are clear, pretty easy to kind of know where you're headed and have some direction. But when the storm comes in, and the storm of life, the storm of health, the storm of whatever it is that can come in, and or fear, we can get off course. And so that shining light of that lighthouse helps to guide us. Hey, move in this direction. That's the towards moves that ACT talks about. We're just taking one stroke, one step, one next little section, moving in that direction. Whether we're getting exactly there or not doesn't matter as much as having a bit of direction with which to move. And so we can get hooked into these storms, we can get hooked into these thoughts and feelings and that sort of thing, and get pulled off course. And how do we realign toward moving to our values? And so I tend to think about actions in line with values more so, getting more aware of what our values are through a slow meandering process, rather than giving somebody a values checklist on day one, but rather reflecting on how their day-to-day occupations impact them, what they care about, where they get really hooked, where they get really upset. All of these things really speak to our values. And so if we do that gradual exploration, having a general idea of where we're headed, we can change direction as we get more information. The map becomes clearer as the values become clearer, and generally moving in that toward direction, resolving challenges along the way, getting better at resolving challenges along the way, building their ability to do so with less and less input from me. No SMART goals are in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm hearing it's like there is an intent and a place, there's some ideas around a place that you want to go. And then you're kind of getting clarity in understanding the values that kind of guide you. And then there's just step by step
And that
things
clarity
that you do.
comes through occupation and reflection on
Yeah.
occupation, I find. Yeah, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah. No, no. How do you feel about your identity as an OT, and then using tools like that? How do you find that kind of experience? Does that, like, yeah, are you able to get
Yeah.
a nice fit and
Yeah.
feel? Yeah.
I find that so kind of the background, often I've worked in mental health in private practice, and often a referral would come when a person's been off work for some time, and the insurance company that's paying for their income while they're off work um, would like to help them to sort of get better faster, because time alone hasn't done it. And so sometimes they would refer them to a psychologist, but if the person still wasn't engaging in daily life, getting back to doing the occupations of life, then I would get the referral. And so I was often coming in after the psychologist was already engaged. Sometimes we get the referral at the same time. And largely the psychologist was using CBT. And I was there for more of that sort of, hey, what do you do in a day? Let's build routine. Let's get back to these meaningful occupations. And the psychologist would call that behavioral activation. And accurate. We just use different language. And we know that the occupation and in CBT, they understand too that the occupation also impacts the symptoms, the thoughts, the feelings, and it just sort of goes around and round. But it was interesting because when the obstacles to engaging in the activity were more feeling things, I was pretty good at managing those with clients. But if they were thinking things, I didn't like the tools that CBT offered, because often it was reframing, labeling the cognitive distortion, trying to talk yourself out of that thought. And I worked with a lot of people who had had a lot of trauma. um, who were shame prone, who were quite anxious. And if an anxious person is taking a big leap, and here we are out at the grocery store for the first time in a year, it would be really weird for them to have positive thoughts. And so for me to say,
Mm.
well, let's reframe that thought, and them to say, okay, I'm really grateful to be at the grocery store. Like none of that, that doesn't have an impact. We could call it distorted. Is that going to help? No. And so I would kind of say, oh, talk to the psychologist about it, while showing compassion and empathy and validation for, yeah, that's, this is hard. And how can we stay present? How can we focus on the occupation? How can we do these things? Get out of our head and a little bit more into action, which is an ACT phrase. And so I discovered ACT in looking for resources. And ACT is transdisciplinary, it's trans diagnostic. It works so beautifully with OT. When you think about like the ultimate goal, it would be moving toward living in line with your values, engaging in meaningful activities, engaging in valued activities. It's occupationally focused. That's the outcome, is engaging in our lives, and in line with values. So I really felt it a beautiful fit for OT without actually having to claim that this is psychology or this is OT or this is social work. Or I learned it from Russ Harris, who's actually a physician, an Australian physician. And so I loved that there was that room where I could interpret it through OT and not lose any of the integrity of it. And in using it as an OT, I never felt like I was compromising any of the integrity of OT. It was a really beautiful fit. Where I do have an identity challenge is that when I'm coaching, when I'm helping OTs who are in different countries, in different provinces within my own country, I'm not allowed to be an OT. And I never take my OT hat off. It's pretty much like it's built in. And
Yeah.
I find that hard where I identify as an OT no matter what, but I'm not allowed to call the work OT. And I could get into trouble if it looks too much like OT, but at the same time, there are no defined lines. And so I've just kept a consistent communication with our regulatory body here so that they understand my intention. They understand
Yeah.
where I've chosen to create lines in the absence of any other lines and navigate it that way. But it does feel weird to not say I'm actually doing OT when I'm supporting other OTs around the world in managing their experiences so that they can engage in what's most important to them.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, there is a lot. And so I guess in terms of that, do you find that it's like it's a tool that just strengthens your practice as an OT? That's how you see it and experience it?
Yeah, I do. I found that when I discovered ACT, it was a well-researched framework that had all of the language and tools for what the way I already naturally see the world as an individual and as an OT, both. So I think back to times where I was practicing mindfulness as a teenager. I'd never heard of mindfulness, but mindfulness was a go to for me. I would go sit on a hill when I was feeling stressed at where I could see the whole city and I could see all of the small cars in traffic going by and gain perspective in this way of just being present and sitting on the mountain and engaging truly in my observing self. And these are all things that ACT gives nice language for, and that like processes and tools and frameworks and exercises and metaphors. And so in that way, it's a model that really strengthens and makes it easier to do what I do naturally
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
with
And
evidence.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm so curious as to how you kind of like embedded that into your way of being as an OT and held on to that OT identity without it kind of being a distraction, or because I feel like for me and possibly other people that I've I think I've noticed is that things like that can kind of lead us away. But I am really trying to understand and work out, because I do think there's, like you're all sort of saying, I can hear it, there's you as an OT, and then there's the things that I bring personally to my role. There's the people that I'm perhaps best suited to serve, and the strengths that I have as an individual that I bring into that. But then underneath that, there's also or alongside that, there's also the tools that I can bring into, um, and it sounds like you have got that quite clear in your work, in your mind, as the those pieces.
I think it's more fluid than that. So yes, I think you're right. But it's more, so let's kind of go through a client. Um, I'll put together a smattering of clients. I meet a client, they're off work, they're struggling with anxiety as well as depression, but anxiety seems to be the bigger limiting factor in their occupational engagement. The payer wants them to go back to work. The client, yeah, they'd like to get back to work eventually, but they're not fully participating in their lives. So that feels like a far off goal. So I say, okay, well, what do you want to be doing, or what do you need to be doing that's hard? Well, I've been trying to go to the grocery store because I need to get out of the house, but I have a panic attack every time I go. I used to really love listening to music, and I don't listen to music anymore. And we have a whole conversation about the Beatles and what music meant to that person, and how did they engage with music, and did they play music? Did they listen to music? Did they dance? Did they what did that mean? Why was that such a meaningful occupation? What else? What else? Well, I can't even look at my workplace. Okay. How that's an obstacle. And I really love my work though. Like, what did you love about work? I loved that I was needed. I loved that I was part of a team. I loved the familiarity of all the people I would see at the hospital. I loved being able to be there to be an integral part of the team without actually having responsibility for that's life or death. Okay, that's really cool. And so exploring, exploring, exploring. So I'm picking up on themes and of trying to notice things that are meaningful for that person throughout. ACT would say their values. If it was sort of just the occupation, which isn't how we typically look at it as OTs. So it's the act of listening to music. That's just the act of the occupation of listening to music. But we know it's layered and nuanced, and the whys and the motivations and the context and the all of those things. But then we go and start to break it down. Okay, so if you would like to be able to see the workplace, you'd like to be able to go to the grocery store, music's really important to you. Where can we start? Like what's manageable? How can we work things backwards? So okay, we're working on the grocery store, let's say. How are we doing those exposures together? Are we using music in the process? Sometimes we even use Beatles lyrics in the process with this one particular guy. And I'm aware of, are we distracting from the exposure that need to feel the feels in the place rather than avoid the feels? That's an ACT thing. That's a CBT thing. It's an exposure therapy thing. So I'm kind of got those frameworks in my mind, but in that moment, it's the occupation of being in the parking lot of the grocery store and listening to the Beatles as we sit there and stay rather than leave because anxiety says that we should leave. And so that's kind of how I'm doing it. So ACT is in there because we don't avoid the feelings. We sit with the feelings, exposures in there because we're sitting with the feelings. OT is everywhere. But I'm pulling in tools, but not in okay, now we're going to do ACT. And
Yeah,
now we're
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
do exposure. And now we're going to do, it's a fluid exploration where there are a variety of tools that show up as they're needed.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I guess what I'm noticing is it's kind of like it's all those pieces are kind of part of you as a human and as an OT that you kind of bring to your work.
Plus a whole lot of education.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, I think as a human, I think it is important to really lean in. Like I'm thinking about if you have 100 OTs in a room, we all have different values of
Yeah.
our own ways of seeing the world that are influenced by so many things. And that's a beautiful thing. And I'm
Yeah.
picturing your group, your collective, I'm picturing my group, and that mosaic and fabric of the variety is a good thing.
It is absolutely a good thing. It is. And I think, yeah, I think that's another thing, that we kind of not push aside and tune into and understand, yeah, itself and maybe where they're best suited to serve. And because, yeah, I don't think, everyone should do everything. Yeah. And again, that's a journey as well of discovery.
How many years have you been an OT now?
It might be 2011 I graduated, so it'd be 12, I guess.
Yeah.
On that maths.
Yeah. And do you bring yourself as a new grad? How different were you from today?
Oh, so different. Yeah, so, so different. I think I see the world in such a different way now, and I see people in such a different light. I think I probably would have been I think I still would have listened to and heard people, but I certainly would have been focused on particular kind of, probably would have placed more weight on strategy and things like that than perhaps anything else. Whereas I think now I place certainly more weight on identity and self and kind of, the other parts, work are around that center. So yeah, it would have looked very, very different. I think, yeah, that's just kind of part and parcel.
Mhm. What would you say to the OT listening to this who works in a more black and white job? Like you and I have our own business. It's so easy for us to say, well, this is how we approach things in a fluid way. And we've structured our work in such a way that we can. Um, and I would imagine there are a lot of OTs out there saying, yeah, I'd love to be more fluid and identity focused, but I've got 40 patients. I have to have this many discharges. My job is equipment.
My sense would be two things come to mind as you sort of say that. One is perhaps try and find your people that, that you connect with, OTs that have a shared, at least a shared view of where they want to be in the work, or what they believe OT is. And because, in the end, we the people that we surround ourselves in, and the culture that we exist in is going to change the way we experience the world. And so I think finding those people is super important. I think the second thing is, and I've been thinking a lot about this, is to kind of really get some work through and get some clarity as to kind of what you believe OT is, what the values are that are most important to guide you, what your strengths are, and um, how they play into your work. What are the most important parts of your work? We did ask the question in our group as to kind of where people felt like the most, where the value lied for their work that they gave. What was the most important part uh, of the work that they did, and where did most of the value lie that they do? If they could choose one word, to pick one word that described this. And it was amazing. Like, every single word, I'm pretty sure every word that was shared was absolutely anchored in the present. They were like understanding, some of it was fun, it was curiosity, it was, can't think of some of the others, but every single one was anchored 100% in the present. And so I think just getting to know and for some people it might be things like advocacy, but I think getting just, I don't know, working through that stuff and getting clear, and then you can kind of understand, I guess, you can place that in context of your work and understand how you can have impact, or maybe if it's perhaps not the right place, and then you can explore other options and other opportunities down the road that maybe are a better fit.
Mm.
Mm. So I don't know, they're the two things that come to mind. They're the two things I've probably been kind of pondering on.
I think that's really good because even if your role on a team is more mechanical, that, it's this, then this, then this. I'm hearing from what you're saying is if you're connected to those values of OT that you hold dear, you can do all of the jobs with the flavor of that. It's how you ask the questions. It's how you provide information. It's how you communicate with the team. It's how you do your notes. It's how you help solve problems. Those can all be done, the same mechanics, in a more connected way to OTs, maybe than the last person who had the job, and maybe set the standard within the team as it is today.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really nicely said. And I think sometimes just kind of having that, going through that process, having some of those bits and pieces kind of written down so you can keep on returning to them and evolving it and orientating like a map, orientating yourself to those things. Yeah, so that you can connect to those things and work out how it fits, because every job is going to be different in terms of, every person is going to be different in terms of the pieces that they bring and the things that the job needs and expects. So I think there can't be a blanket answer. It needs to be uniquely tailored.
Who are some of your OT role models that you really look up to or admire or appreciate? It doesn't have to be up.
Yeah. Look, I think I've appreciated people who've challenged my thinking over the years. I think I've had role models, like I guess who I've worked with along the way. Mandy C. Fang has probably been a big one who's challenged my thinking locally. Laura Park Figueroa is someone who's supported and challenged my thinking in terms of nature-based practice and what that can be. I think the documentary that Rhiannon and Chris put out recently just highlighted some of the amazing people that, have done amazing work in the OT world. And I thought that was fascinating for me to hear some of those people talk, and they talked like I imagine OT, this kind of data I want to be. And I just thought it was so interesting that was how all of these, really pretty much all of these people spoke, how they spoke about it. But then again, that disconnect to what that actually looks like. And either the leaders, so it gets me curious of what happens in between, what happens in between from the thought to the ongoing application.
And for the people who are listening and want to find the documentary, it's called Finding Me in OT. Yeah, really good. And it's free for anybody to watch. I agree. I've been thinking about that documentary or snippets of it through this whole conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think I might share another story or an analogy, which I think I've been thinking about, and I think it connects really nicely to that and to our conversation and to the work you're doing about pioneer of hand washing. And so it's this guy. So in must have been sort of the early 1800s, the mortality rate for births to mothers, was 13 to 18%. So, it may, sadly, 3 in 20, I guess, would kind of pass away in that process. And this guy, Ignaz Semmelweis, I think his name would possibly be pronounced I can't remember where he was, but he went through this process of kind of going, what is going on? Why is this happening? Why is this this shouldn't be like this? And so he tried all these different explored all these different ideas, and then landed on this idea of hand washing and decided to trial it in his hospital. And so he developed this hypothesis, tested it out, and the mortality dropped to 1 to 2% in kind of the process of trialing this thing. And so he's, but the medical community,
they laughed at it.
Crazy,
and they thought it was ridiculous. Yes.
Yeah. Right. And so this thing didn't spread until, it wasn't accepted, years after he'd had this discovery. But I just thought it was so wonderful to think that something that this solution that seems so obvious right now, hand washing is the most obvious thing in the world, right? how was that not a thing? But before this point, it was non-existent. And to me, that gives me some, some confidence to go, hey, like right now, we're doing the best we can with what we know.
Yeah.
But in 100 years' time, our great grandkids are probably going to look back and go like, idiots, like, why were they doing this? That is so silly. It's so obvious that that was not the way to do things.
Yeah.
Um, and I think for me, that just is really nice story to kind of go, okay, like I'm here, we're doing the best we can, but people are going to look back and they're going to learn more things, and they're going to, and we're going to be part of that process of discovery, and they're going to know more, and they're going to do better. And what we're doing right now is probably going to look dated and wrong.
When somebody finds this, dust this off in the interwebs.
Yeah, right.
Listen to us having this conversation. But it's interesting because we look back at different levels of pioneers. There were pioneers before us in OT. We're pioneers in OT, exploring, challenging, asking a lot of questions. And those people, like that, there's never going to be a moment of arrival, right? Sort of like your ship, that they'll be pioneering new fronts at that point with all of the knowledge that came along. And that is the beauty. Life's a journey, not a destination.
Right. Isn't that freeing? I found that quite freeing. So I thought perhaps share that and hope that was a little bit freeing for some others as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. You know, it's interesting. My grandmother, she was a microbiologist, and there are some newspaper articles I found of her in the 60s, where they highlighted her doing her job. And one of them was promoting hand washing in the hospital and it was the 60s, right? So this is 80 years later or so, or even more, from that fellow. And still, it wasn't normal yet. It was, hey, did you know you should wash your hands? And here's why.
It's
interesting.
Too true. Too true. How long it takes us still even to implement these things, hey?
Yeah. Well, I so appreciate this conversation. I have a few last questions for you that I ask everybody. Are you ready for them?
Yes.
Okay. What does being brave mean to you?
I think being brave to me looks very much like, being curious and leaning into the uncertain. I think, as we've chatted about today, it's following your values and just trusting the process. All that encompasses, and I think asking questions when you perhaps feel like you don't have the right to do so.
What is something brave you've done recently?
I think for me, it was starting the Becoming Collective. I think, I guess I trusted. I did a lot of thinking and a lot of chatting to people and a lot of reading and prep, and then I just kind of trusted my gut that it was something that was needed. And I didn't know. I guess there's uncertainty. I didn't know who was going to show up, or if anyone was going to show up. And kind of the trepidation that comes with putting that out there is, it's like, I don't know if I hadn't probably felt to that extent. I think when I actually put it out into the world, the level of vulnerability that kind of comes with that. But yeah, I guess it's part of the process. Putting it out there, reflecting, and then seeing what lands, and then going again.
I hear a lot of OTs, they feel that that vulnerability as they prepare to put something out. And the fear and trepidation and all of the self-doubt that comes along with that. And then they take that as the sign that they should not do it, and they wait until they feel confident. And of course, the confidence never comes. So how did you manage to proceed with that fear and self-doubt present?
I think maybe some of the stuff we've talked about that, it's probably wrong. It's my answer. It's almost certainly wrong. But that's okay, because if I don't feel I can't get it right, I think that's almost everything I do is probably wrong to some degree, but it's going to be right in some degree as well. And if I don't go through that process, then I can't just do the things and move and push things forwards and learn. So I think that's kind of a philosophy I've
which is
taken on.
truly a growth mindset. It's that sense of, I don't have to have it right. Let's start with the shitty first draft. And from there, we can learn and explore more. We can, and of course, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with your product. It's wonderful, but it's that sense of releasing yourself from doing it perfectly and
Yeah,
acknowledging
yeah,
that let's do it imperfectly so we can learn.
yeah, absolutely. And put in a lot of time and energy to get it as right as possible when I say that.
Sure.
But I guess acknowledge that it's not going to be right, and that's okay.
Yeah. How would you like to see OTs be a little bit more brave in the coming years?
I would love to see us, I guess, find our center and stand that little bit firmer. I feel like, me included, it's kind of, as things show up and I feel, a little bit uneasy, that I will kind of, move with the ebbs and flows of the demands that are placed on me by clients or colleagues. When my gut tells me that maybe this isn't the thing I should be doing. And so for me, I wonder if we as individuals within a great community can get clearer for ourselves and as a community, and then, stand a little bit firmer in what we do. And alongside the irony of leaning into uncertainty, maybe that's a challenge.
It's a dialectic sort of thing. There's room for that. How can people connect with you? What would you like them to do after listening to this?
Certainly, if this has gotten you, curious and interested, head to thebecomingcollective.com and have a look and see whether that something in there sparks your curiosity. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, Brad Williams. I'm in Adelaide, or you can feel free to flick me an email. Do that hello@thebecomingcollective.com or brad@naturallygathered.com.au. Reach out. I'd love to hear from people. I love ideas. I love people to challenge me and say, well, that probably missed the mark. And that would be great too.
That sounds really good. Oh, thank you. This has been an enriching conversation for me. I love speaking with people who are willing to go into the gray and explore and never come out with a black or white answer, because it most certainly will be false if it's too far either extreme.
Absolutely. No, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me, and thanks for doing the work and showing up yourself.
Thank you for all you're doing. I feel like we're companions in this world of OTs and supporting OTs. Thank you. At the time of this release, mid-March, Brad is about to open up entry into the Becoming Collective. So if you are curious about leaning more into the types of things that Brad's talking about, be sure to visit thebecomingcollective.com or reach out to him on social media. He's on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about how I see things and how I support occupational therapists in their personal and professional development, send me a message. I'm most frequently on Facebook, but you can also find me on LinkedIn, or my website is balanceworks.online. If you've been enjoying this podcast, I sure would appreciate a review, a follow, a download, whatever it is you can do on your podcast platform. That really helps this podcast get out to people who need to hear these messages. Thanks so much for listening. As always, be brave, OTs.